Welcome to today's deep dive. I am genuinely looking forward to the conversation we are about to have today.
Same here. It is a really weighty topic.
It is mostly because we are tackling something that feels incredibly urgent right now. You know those moments where maybe you are sitting in traffic or you are just scrolling through your phone late at night?
Oh yeah, doom scrolling.
Right, exactly, doom scrolling.
Oh.
You are trying to balance 100 different responsibilities and you just hit this absolute wall. You pause and think, what is the actual point of all this noise?
It is a totally modern kind of existential exhaustion.
Yes, existential exhaustion. The source material we are examining today hits exactly on that feeling. We are exploring a fascinating compilation text. It is titled, O Mankind, the Final Call, Divine Guidance for All Humanity.
And this was compiled by Abu Numan.
Correct. It is essentially a curated collection of 19 specific verses from the Qur'an. But what makes this compilation so striking to me is the intended audience.
Right, because it is not who you might think.
Exactly. These verses aren't addressed to a specific demographic or a particular historical tribe, or even just to followers of a certain faith. They are explicitly addressed to all of humanity.
Which is a massive scope.
It really is. That means they're speaking directly to you, to me, to every single person navigating life on this planet today.
And that universal scope is precisely what defines our mission for this deep dive. Our goal today is to take this text, which functions as this highly concentrated philosophical, ethical, and spiritual manual.
A manual for life, basically.
A manual. And we want to examine it by stripping away the unfamiliar jargon that might otherwise create a barrier to entry. We want to extract the core insights in a way that resonates with you, the modern individual.
Regardless of your personal background.
Exactly. Your upbringing or whatever your current belief system might be right now. This text essentially acts as a mirror, held up to the distracted human condition.
It really challenges some deeply ingrained assumptions.
It does. It challenges how we operate, and it asks you to reflect profoundly on your own existence. So we are going to examine this material, impartially exploring the philosophical arguments it presents and unpacking the psychological insights it offers regarding how we live our lives today.
And to do that properly, we have to start by addressing the massive elephant in the room, which, to his credit, the author tackles right on page 1.
He doesn't pull any punches.
No, he does not. The text opens with a very stark assertion. Islam is frequently misunderstood in the modern world. The author outlines how it is often viewed through a specific cultural or media lens that frames it as unjust, oppressive, or promoting backwardness.
It is a very common perception.
Right, and he doesn't shy away from this reality or try to pretend this perception doesn't exist. He confronts it head on, which I think is vital before we even get into the philosophical concepts.
The analysis provided regarding why this misunderstanding happens is actually quite profound. It relies on a very old, very persistent psychological truth.
People fear the unknown.
Exactly. The text quotes this poignant concept that people are enemies of what they do not know. The argument here is that human beings have a natural, almost evolutionary tendency to fear or reject what is foreign or poorly understood.
And in the modern context, this negative perception stems from two main factors, according to the text. First, there is the issue of media bias.
Which, by its very nature, thrives on conflict.
Right. It amplifies the most extreme, sensational, or distorted narratives because, well, that is what gets clicks and captures attention.
But the second factor the author points to is perhaps more deeply self-critical. It is the flawed actions of actual practitioners.
This was a really interesting part of the text.
Yeah, the text freely admits that there are many individuals who claim the faith but do not practice it correctly, or who manipulate its teachings for political, cultural, or personal gain.
But let me push back on that, or at least play devil's advocate for a moment, because a skeptic might say, well, if the followers are doing terrible things, doesn't that reflect on the philosophy itself?
Sure, that is the natural counterargument. But the author argues strongly against that, stating it is fundamentally unfair to judge any philosophy, any faith, or any system of thought by its worst adherents.
Right.
If you want to understand what a constitution, a philosophy, or a text actually says, you cannot just look at the people who are actively ignoring or violating its rules.
And that is a standard we apply to almost every other field of human endeavor, right? We don't judge the scientific method by a scientist who falsifies data.
Exactly, or the concept of democracy by a corrupt politician who buys votes. The proposed solution in the text is elegant in its simplicity. To understand the faith accurately, One must bypass flawed human practitioners entirely and go straight to the primary sources.
Which in this context means looking directly at the Qur'an and the authentic, verified teachings of the Prophet Muhammad.
By adopting this methodology, you bypass the cultural baggage, the geopolitical manipulations, and the human errors. You engage directly with the foundational ideas in their pure form.
And that is exactly the methodology we are applying in this deep dive. We are looking directly at the source material to see what it actually demands of humanity.
Which brings us to the first foundational verse the text presents. It really sets the stage for the entire philosophical framework.
Abu Numan uses this incredibly vivid imagery of a bustling modern marketplace to contextualize this verse. I want you to picture it. You are walking through a dense city center.
Sirens going off, people shouting.
People rushing past you with their coffees, staring down at their screens. Everyone is chasing work deadlines, worrying about social media metrics, stressing over inflation or rent.
The sheer volume of distraction is suffocating.
Suffocating is the perfect word. And then cutting straight through all of that modern noise, the text presents this universal call. O mankind, worship your Lord who created you and those before you.
To really grasp the weight of that statement, we need to redefine that word worship, because the text frames it in a way that is largely free of the heavy institutional religious jargon we usually associate with it.
Right, it is not just about a building.
Not at all. In this context, worship isn't confined to a set of rituals performed in a specific building once a week. It is presented as an all-encompassing call to recognize the fundamental source of your existence.
The author asks the reader to pause, to mentally step out of that noisy marketplace and notice the profound silent miracles we take for granted every single second.
Like the fact that your heart is beating right now without you consciously directing it to do so.
Or the fact that your eyes blink to lubricate themselves without your instruction.
Exactly. The incredibly complex exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide happening in your lungs at this exact moment. The text frames worship fundamentally as the act of acknowledging the creator behind that intricate, flawless biological design.
I hear that, and it is a beautiful sentiment. But if we are looking at this analytically what does this all mean? Why does the text emphasize this specific acknowledgement so heavily?
That is the big question.
If the creator is all-powerful as the text claims, why mandate this recognition? It almost sounds to a modern ear like a demand for validation.
That is a very common modern critique, and the text provides a fascinating counter-argument. It asserts that worship is absolutely not for the creator's benefit.
It is for ours.
Precisely. The creator, by definition, within this framework, is entirely self-sufficient and independent of creation. Therefore, the act of worship is designed entirely as a compass for the human soul.
The underlying philosophy here suggests that human beings are fundamentally wired to worship something.
It is an inescapable part of our psychology. If we do not direct that innate reverence and submission toward the ultimate creator, we will inevitably project it onto other things.
We will worship money.
Or social status.
Our careers or our own fleeting desires, the validation of strangers on the internet.
We make idols out of our anxiety.
Exactly, we really do, but none of those things can create life, and none of them can provide lasting psychological peace because they are inherently volatile and temporary.
Turning to the ultimate creator is presented here as the only path to true fulfillment, because it aligns the human being with ultimate reality. It acts as a grounding mechanism.
A grounding mechanism for the soul. I love that. Pulling the individual away from the exhausting manufactured illusions of the modern world and anchoring them to something permanent.
But what's fascinating here is how this text refuses to separate the soul from the body. It seamlessly transitions from what we worship to what we physically consume.
Right, let's examine the second foundational verse dealing with sustenance. This part felt incredibly relevant to the modern day. It introduces two Arabic concepts that I want to translate and explore because they form a massive ethical framework.
The concepts of halal and tayyib.
Yes. First, that what we consume must be halal, meaning permissible or lawful. But second, and crucially, it must also be tayyib, which translates to good, wholesome, or pure.
The depth of that distinction between halal and tayyib is one of the most compelling ethical arguments in the text. It moves the conversation far beyond a simple dietary checklist of allowed and forbidden ingredients.
It is not just looking at the back of a nutrition label.
Right. It establishes a profound framework for ethical consumerism. The text explains that something might be technically legally permissible to consume, say a perfectly ripe apple, a beautifully tailored shirt, or a standard cup of coffee.
That makes it legally halal.
But if that coffee was farmed using exploited labor, or if the shirt was manufactured in a sweatshop, or if the apple was purchased using money obtained through fraud or deceit, it entirely loses its state of being tayyib.
It is no longer pure.
Exactly.
It is tainted.
So it is not just about the biological composition of the item. It is about the entire invisible history of how that item got to your hands.
Precisely. The text argues that consuming things that are not tayyib actually taints the human soul and blocks spiritual progress. This connects directly to the most pressing ethical dilemmas we face today.
When you purchase something, this philosophy demands that you consider the supply chain. Were the workers treated fairly? Was the environment devastated to produce this? Was the transaction honest? The text demands a hypervigilant level of mindfulness about how our consumption impacts not just our own bodies, but the broader fabric of the world. It frames ethical consumption as a direct manifestation of your spiritual state.
That is a massive cognitive load, a
Yeah.
heavy responsibility. And to explain why it is so difficult to maintain that standard, Abu Numan introduces the concept of an unseen battle regarding our daily choices.
The footsteps of Satan.
Yes, the text specifically warns against following the footsteps of Satan. What I found so striking here is the methodology described. It doesn't frame this entity as some cartoonish monster urging you to commit massive atrocities out of nowhere.
No, it is much more subtle than that.
It frames this influence as a creeping deceiver who specializes in normalizing harmful choices. It is that internal whisper that says, everyone else is cutting this corner.
Or just this one time won't matter.
Right, or it is just business, don't take it personally.
The psychological insight there is remarkably sharp. The text outlines how destructive habits and societal corruption rarely begin with massive, unprecedented leaps into evil.
They almost always start with small, easily rationalized steps.
Hence the specific phrasing of footsteps. It is a gradual desensitization. And this directly informs the text's rationale behind why certain substances or behaviors are forbidden entirely, such as the consumption of alcohol or specific meats.
Right, because the modern assumption is often that religious dietary laws are just arbitrary ancient rules meant to restrict human joy or exert control.
But the text reframes this entirely. It presents these restrictions as an act of profound divine protection. The author introduces the concept of the human body as an amana.
Amana. That is a crucial term.
It means a sacred trust. Your body, your intellect, your health, these do not inherently belong to you. They are framed as a temporary loan given to you by the Creator.
Therefore, you have a fiduciary duty to protect that trust. Forbidding substances that cloud judgment, destroy the liver, impair motor function, or lead to destructive social behaviors is not an arbitrary restriction.
It is an act of ultimate care by the designer of that body. It functions as a manufacturer's manual for preserving the physical and spiritual integrity of the human being.
That concept of preserving integrity leads perfectly into the next major theme, the internal world. The author shifts our focus from the physical things we put into our bodies to the invisible internal struggles we all face.
The text talks extensively about the human heart.
But it is very clear it is not just referring to the biological pump in your chest. It is presenting the heart as the absolute center of human emotion, intention, consciousness, and moral compass.
And the analogy drawn is quite stark. Just as the physical body can contract a virus or develop a disease, the text asserts that this spiritual heart is highly vulnerable to its own set of devastating silent diseases.
The author specifically diagnoses them: envy, arrogance, jealousy, injustice, and pride. What is sobering about this analysis is how it traces external societal decay back to these internal invisible ailments.
The argument is that these diseases do not stay contained within the individual. They invariably bleed out into the surrounding world.
It is a cascading effect.
Exactly. The text argues that broken families, toxic corporate cultures, societal divisions, and even massive global conflicts can ultimately be traced back to these unchecked diseases of the human heart.
Think about it. If a political leader's heart is infected with deep-seated arrogance and pride, thousands, perhaps millions, might suffer the consequences of their policies.
Or if a community's collective heart is infected with envy and jealousy, social trust evaporates and unity is destroyed. The text views these internal flaws as the root cause of all external human suffering.
It is a brilliant diagnosis of the human condition, especially when you look at how modern algorithms and social media are literally designed to breed envy and comparison.
They are engines of envy.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
But the text doesn't just leave us with this heavy diagnosis, it provides the antidote. It presents the Qur'an itself fundamentally as a healing manual for these specific internal ailments.
And the mechanics of this healing, as described in the source, are essentially a form of profound cognitive behavioral therapy.
Oh, I like that framing. How so?
Let's take the disease of arrogance. How do you cure a deeply arrogant person? The text argues that the cure is a fundamental shift in perspective, realizing that absolutely all power, all wealth, all intellect, and all greatness belong entirely to the Creator.
So when a human being truly internalizes that their own achievements, their intelligence, their networking skills, their resources are entirely dependent on the Creator's will,
And could be taken away in an instant.
arrogance evaporates. It cannot survive that realization. It is replaced by deep humility.
And what about envy? That feels like the defining disease of our era.
The cure for envy follows a similar cognitive shift. The text states that when you truly realize and trust that the Creator distributes provisions, wealth, and opportunities according to an infinite, unseen wisdom, you stop resenting what others possess.
You recognize that what was meant for you will not miss you?
And what missed you was never meant for you. This instantly neutralizes the anxiety of comparison and replaces it with profound contentment. The divine guidance is framed not as a set of arbitrary chants, but as a practical cognitive shift that actively cleanses the heart.
It cleanses it of its most destructive and exhausting tendencies.
There is a fascinating pivot that happens next in the text. We go from the deep internal psychological world straight into the external biological world.
To address one of the oldest philosophical hurdles.
The concept of the afterlife.
Hmm.
The author directly addresses the modern skeptic who might laugh at the idea of bodily resurrection.
And the text doesn't just demand blind faith here.
Not at all. Here's where it gets really interesting. It actually points directly to human embryology as tangible, observable scientific proof. It walks the listener through these incredibly detailed stages of human development.
Yes, the argument is highly empirical in its approach. The text asks the skeptical reader to literally trace their own biological origin.
It describes the harrowing, improbable journey from essentially dust and nutrients to a microscopic drop of fluid to a clinging clot embedded in the womb to a formed lump of flesh.
Then the formation of bones, the clothing of those bones with muscle, the emergence of a breathing infant.
The progression to physical maturity, and finally, for those who live long enough, the regression into a decrepit old age where knowledge and physical power fade away.
But I can hear the skeptic now. A modern skeptic might argue, yes, that is biology. We understand cell division now. Ascribing that to a creator is just a God of the gaps argument, inserting divinity where we just haven't fully explained the science yet.
How does the text's argument move past that critique?
The text anticipates that line of thinking by focusing not on the gaps in our knowledge, but on the sheer staggering complexity of what we do know. The author is asking the skeptic to confront the absolute improbability of their own existence.
Every single cell dividing perfectly.
Millions of complex genetic instructions executing flawlessly without any conscious input from the parents or the infant.
The text argues that recognizing this as a meticulously designed biological symphony orchestrated by a creator is the most logical conclusion, rather than attributing such unfathomable, ordered complexity to blind, unguided chance.
And it beautifully pairs that microscopic biological journey with a macro-level parable about the natural world that we see all the time.
The parable of the barren earth. The author asks you to look at a barren, dry, cracked patch of earth. Think of a desert that hasn't seen rain in months.
It looks completely dead. There's zero sign of life.
But then the rain falls, and suddenly, within days, that seemingly dead earth quivers, swells, and bursts into vibrant, lush green life. Seeds that were dormant and seemingly dead are suddenly resurrected.
The text uses these two observable everyday phenomena, human embryology and the botanical revival of dead earth, to build a highly compelling logical syllogism.
The author challenges the reader with a simple question of logic.
If the creator possesses the sheer power and intricate knowledge to orchestrate your complex biological existence from microscopic dust in the first place,
And if the creator possesses the power to routinely resurrect dead earth with water every single spring,
why would reconstructing a human being after death be considered difficult?
if you can build the complex machine from scratch, reassembling it isn't harder.
Precisely. In this framework, the text positions the concept of resurrection not as a matter of blind irrational faith, but as a highly logical, inescapable extension of the natural cycles of creation and recreation that we observe every single day.
If he has the power to initiate it the first time, the text argues repeating it a second time is just as certain, if not logically simpler.
It is a very robust logical framework.
Now, to deliver these massive truths about the diseases of the heart, the ethics of consumption, the biological proof of resurrection, the text discusses the mechanism of delivery, the messengers.
And it specifically details the role of the final messenger, Prophet Muhammad.
What stood out to me is how the text frames his arrival. It is not presented as a sudden, isolated historical anomaly. It is positioned as the final link in a very long, very deliberate historical chain of guidance.
That continuity is vital to understanding the text's central argument. The author explicitly links the final messenger to the great prophets recognized across various global traditions.
Figures like Adam, Abraham, Moses, and Jesus.
The text asserts that they did not bring competing religions. Rather, they all carried the exact same fundamental core message: to worship the one Creator alone and to live ethically.
However, the source makes a crucial distinction regarding the scope of the final message. It notes that while previous messengers were sent to specific nations, specific tribes, or to address specific societal issues of their historical period, the final messenger was sent with a mandate for all of humanity.
For the rest of time.
Which perfectly loops back and counters the misconception the author highlighted at the very beginning. The idea that this faith is a regional, cultural, or tribal phenomenon. The text emphatically declares it to be a universal, global guidance.
And there's this profound analogy the text uses when talking about humanity's response to this universal message. It is the ocean drop analogy.
Yes, the ocean drop. The author says, imagine an endless, vast ocean stretching beyond the horizon. If you take a needle, dip it into that ocean, and pull out a single drop of water, does that diminish the volume of the ocean?
Of course not. It is imperceptible.
If we connect that analogy to the broader theological picture the text is painting, it reveals a fascinating point about the nature of the Creator.
The text argues that human belief, or human disbelief, has absolutely zero impact on the Creator's power, majesty, or dominion.
The Creator does not need humanity to believe in order to validate his existence.
The guidance, the historical messengers, the revealed texts, these are all framed entirely as a mechanism of mercy instituted for the human soul benefit.
So when a person chooses to ignore the message, they aren't hurting the Creator.
Not at all. And conversely, when a person chooses to believe and follow the ethical guidance, they aren't adding to the Creator's greatness. They are simply picking up a compass in the middle of a dark forest. They are saving themselves.
The text heavily emphasizes this dichotomy. The Creator is entirely free of need, infinitely self-sustaining, while humanity is fundamentally biologically and spiritually dependent.
That theme of fundamental human dependence is explored with almost surgical precision in the next section of the text. Abu Newman really takes aim at our modern illusion of absolute independence.
We walk around feeling so powerful, so self-sufficient. We build massive skyscrapers, we map the human genome, we create artificial intelligence.
We think we are the untouchable masters of the universe.
But the text points out the brutal reality. A microscopic virus, something we cannot even see with the naked eye, can shut down the entire globe and bring us to our knees in weeks.
A tiny blood clot can end our perceived reign instantly.
The loss of just one of our basic senses reveals our utter, terrifying fragility. And the author uses an analogy here that we really need to sit with. I have been thinking about it constantly. It is the $1 million for your eyes analogy.
It is a brilliant, highly effective thought experiment that cuts through our entitlement. The text asks you to imagine a scenario. Someone approaches you with a briefcase containing $1 million in untraceable cash.
Okay, I am listening.
It is yours free and clear. But the condition of the trade is that you must give them your eyes. You will be permanently blind for the rest of your life. Would you take that deal?
No one in their right mind takes that deal. You could offer $1 billion. The ability to see your family, to see a sunset, to navigate the world independently. It's literally priceless.
Exactly. Your vision is worth more to you than any sum of money. Yet the text points out the staggering hypocrisy of the human condition.
We walk around carrying these multi-million-dollar priceless assets in our skulls, and we rarely, if ever, pause to genuinely thank the Creator who gave them to us completely for free.
We utilize the immense gifts of the Creator, our sight, our hearing, our intellect, to navigate the world, to build our wealth, to enjoy our lives, often while completely and deliberately ignoring the giver of those very gifts.
It highlights a profound defect in the human psyche. Our persistent failure to recognize our own inherent weakness and the sheer magnitude of the unearned blessings we possess.
We are fundamentally entitled.
We are. And what is brilliant is how the text takes this shared human fragility, the fact that every single one of us is equally dependent on these unearned gifts, and uses it to completely dismantle tribalism, racism, and social hierarchy.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the author points out that regardless of your bank account or your nationality, we are all created from the exact same single origin.
We all share this exact same fragile biological reality.
Yes, and this raises an incredibly pertinent question for our times. If we are all fundamentally so similar, so equally fragile, why is humanity so violently divided?
The text addresses this beautifully and sociologically. It states that the Creator purposefully made humanity into different nations, different tribes, and different races with varying languages and cultures.
But the stated divine purpose for this diversity is strictly not to establish a hierarchy, not to conquer one another, and certainly not to divide into warring factions.
The purpose, according to the text, is simply that you may know one another. Diversity is framed as an opportunity for mutual discovery and cooperation, not a justification for supremacy.
It radically redefines the metric of human value.
It really does. In this framework, true honor and worth are not based on your skin color, the passport you hold, your corporate title, or your lineage. The text argues that the most noble person in the sight of the Creator is simply the one with the most taqwa.
Taqwa. This is another crucial concept to translate.
Taqwa encompasses righteousness, ethical integrity, a deep sense of moral responsibility, and a constant vigilant mindfulness of the Creator in all your actions.
It is a completely invisible, entirely merit-based spiritual system that shatters all superficial human prejudices. You cannot buy taqwa, you cannot inherit it, and you cannot fake it.
It is the ultimate equalizer. But the text isn't naive. It provides a very sharp, almost cynical critique of human behavior, even for those who do occasionally acknowledge the Creator.
It introduces this recurring psychological phenomena that we could call the storm of fickle gratitude.
The author observes a very specific human reaction. When people are in a terrifying crisis, let's say you are on an airplane and it hits violent dropping turbulence.
Or you are waiting in a hospital room for a scary biopsy result.
Exactly. All the modern ego drops away instantly. Even the most hardened, self-proclaimed skeptics will suddenly find themselves crying out, praying, bargaining with a higher power for help.
In those moments of sheer terror, the illusion of self-sufficiency shatters, and the innate human instinct to call upon the ultimate source of power takes over.
But the tragedy, as the text acutely outlines, is the immediate aftermath. What happens the moment the turbulence stops and the wheels safely touch down?
What happens the moment the doctor says the tumor is benign?
People almost immediately forget the desperate promises they made. They go right back to their distractions, right back to their petty grievances, right back to their unethical behaviors.
And right back to ignoring the Creator who just delivered them from disaster.
It's the definition of fair weather faith. I need you when I am crashing, but don't bother me when I'm cruising.
Precisely. The text warns incredibly heavily against this endless cycle of fickle gratitude. It emphasizes that worldly life, with all its modern comforts, its technological insulation, and its endless entertainment, is ultimately just a temporary delusion that lulls us into a false sense of security.
The text urges the reader to cultivate a state of mindfulness where they maintain the intense sincerity and humility they feel during the terrifying storm, even when the skies are clear and life is easy.
And to really hammer home how foolish it is to rely on anything other than that ultimate power, we have to look at the grand finale of the text's overview.
Nu'man uses a parable here that is just devastating in its logic. It is meant to show the absolute undeniable contrast between the infinite power of the Creator and the complete, almost laughable powerlessness of everything else.
It is known as the parable of the fly.
It is a vivid, profound, and somewhat humorous image, but the philosophical implications are staggering. The text states, imagine if all the false gods, all the idols, all the entities and concepts that humanity has ever worshipped or relied upon, besides the true Creator, decided to pool their resources.
If they all gathered together in one room and combined their ultimate power, the text asserts that they would not have the ability to create a single solitary insignificant fly from scratch.
They couldn't assemble the wings, the compound eyes, or spark the life into it.
And the text goes even further to mock this false power. It says that if a simple fly were to swoop down and steal a tiny crumb of food from these entities, all of them combined wouldn't even have the power to retrieve that crumb from the fly.
It is the ultimate illustration of impotence. Okay, let's unpack this. To understand why this matters to us today, we have to translate the concept of false gods. The author makes it very clear that idols are not just ancient primitive stone statues sitting in a museum.
We are far too sophisticated for that now.
Today, our false deities are much more insidious. They are wealth, they are social status, they are political power, they are the stock market or the boss who controls our paycheck.
We dedicate our entire lives, our health, and our ethics to these things, worshiping them with our time and anxiety, genuinely believing they will save us or bring us ultimate peace.
We sacrifice our families for our careers, thinking the career will protect us from hardship.
Exactly. And the text applies a profound, culminating psychological insight here. It concludes the parable by stating, "Weak are the pursuer and the pursued."
The author is explaining a fundamental law of human nature. When you chase after money or the approval of a boss or social status seeking ultimate security and peace, you will always inevitably be left anxious and empty.
Why? Because the things you are chasing are inherently weak and limited. Your boss cannot control your ultimate fate. Your boss cannot even guarantee their own next heartbeat.
A massive bank account cannot cure a terminal illness or mend a broken family. These modern idols are ultimately powerless to alter the reality of your existence.
The text argues that turning your heart to the ultimate creator, the only entity who has absolutely no limits, who controls all outcomes, and who can create the fly in the universe, is the only logical way to achieve unshakable internal peace and true psychological resilience.
You stop relying on the weak and you rely entirely on the strong. So bringing this all together, what does this actually mean for you, the listener, navigating your life tomorrow morning?
This compilation, O Mankind, is not presented as just a dusty list of ancient arbitrary rules.
It is a profound, demanding, ethical, and spiritual mirror. It is asking you right now to strip away the exhausting noise of the modern world. It is asking you to look critically at what you consume and to choose ethical purity over mindless convenience.
It is asking you to look deep inside your chest and actively heal your heart of the arrogance and envy that are destroying our society.
It is asking you to look at the astonishing biology of your own body and recognize the undeniable logical signature of a master creator.
It is asking you to stop chasing powerless, anxiety-inducing illusions and to find rest in ultimate reality.
It truly functions as a comprehensive manual for human existence. And as we reach the conclusion of the text, the author introduces this overarching concept of the journey back to Allah.
The fundamental idea is that this life, with all its trials and triumphs, is not the destination. It is merely the road we are traveling on to return to our Creator.
And understanding that changes everything about how you live. It raises a final, crucial question for you to consider.
If our modern legacy is almost entirely measured by what we leave behind, our digital footprints, our bank accounts, our career titles, our properties, how drastically would your daily decisions change today if you viewed those things not as your ultimate legacy, but merely as temporary travel provisions?
If you knew with absolute certainty that not a single piece of it could cross the border at the end of the journey, what exactly are you packing in your suitcase right now?
That is the question you have to answer.
Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us. We hope it gave you something profound to chew on as you navigate the rest of your day. You, the listener, are a part of this journey too. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep looking deeper.